I want to talk to you about your very survival as one who's interested in peace. I think one of the beautiful things about this world is most of us grew up with an innate sense that peace is a good thing, and that if you watch children play, or if you take a look at a beautiful background, we have this innate desire for peace. But often, somewhere along the line, we lose it, or we think it's not practical or realistic. And that light, that innate sense of peace and justice and goodness, if we don't tend it, it will go out. One of my favorite peace builders, Thich Nhat Hanh, he's a Buddhist peace builder, and he says, our attention is like a watering can. Whatever we will water will grow. And so if we water all of the bad things, they will grow if that's where we spend all of our attention. So when we need to figure out as peace builders how to nurture and water and maintain that innate sense of peace builders. So many different works of peace building focus on how do you stop the people doing violence from doing that, and we need to do that. But in this video series, we're focusing on how do we help the peace builders to thrive and to enjoy their work as peace builders. So my name is Jarem Sawatsky. I'm a peace builder, an author, a researcher, and a professor. I was also one of the founding co-directors of the Canadian School of Peacebuilding at Canadian Mennonite University. And for the last 15 years, I've been teaching and training students, and I haven't counted how many. There's hundreds, I don't know if it's in the thousands, of students that I've worked with, and their work is just deeply inspiring. What they've done with trying to apply conflict transformation and restorative justice and peace building, they've done it in so many different areas. You know, some are lawyers, and some are farmers, and some are community peace builders, and some are working as social business entrepreneurs, and some work with people with disabilities. Others work as social workers, as teachers, and some work, you know, in our home in working with Aboriginal people. Some are Aboriginal people, some are on the other side of the world. And so I found this deeply inspiring. In the third video, I'm going to tell you some of the stories of what these people are doing with these kind of lessons on of peace building, because I find them so deeply inspiring. This is the first video series that I've made. Throughout my career, I've been suspicious that the internet and technical ways of connecting isn't a good medium for peace builders. That's what I've thought in the past. But I'm starting to change my thinking on this. The whole world has changed significantly from the internet, as well as lots of other things. And I think we are moving in a time where peace builders need to reach beyond borders. We can't be confined within our own borders as peace builders. If you think about it, violence, trauma, ecological disasters, none of these respect international borders or any other kind of borders. And if we're going to go where the suffering is and where the pain is, we also need to then be peace builders without borders. But it's not just the bad stuff that doesn't respect the borders. Joy and happiness and a healthy lake, beauty, these things also aren't limited by borders. And so there's a positive sense in which we need to be reach out beyond our borders. And so this is a video series training on beyond borders. I've spent most of the last year focusing on 3 questions, and I want to share about them over the course of this video series. And the first question is, what are the best tools and stories I've learned about us inspiring and equipping and sustaining peace builders. It seems to me that this is one of the most important tasks, at least that I see for myself. How do you equip and inspire peace builders? And I've spent a ridiculous amount of time in school learning about these things. Like, I have 4 degrees in peace and conflict studies, but you know, as in every field, our real learning comes when we start interacting with actual people, and that has been an even deeper teacher for me. But I want to try and share with you the very best tools that I've learned over the course of my studies, and share them for you for free. I hope that they're helpful for you. I don't think these tools don't belong in universities just for those that can afford it or have the time or the ability to study in universities. I think as peace builders we have to figure out how to share more freely, and this is one tiny step in that direction. So what are the very best tools for equipping and inspiring and sustaining peace builders? The second question has to do with technology. Is there some new means of sharing information and interacting as peace builders that is available to us in today's world that maybe wasn't before? Are there new ways of sharing this information back and forth? I spent a lot of time thinking about this. And the third question, and this is maybe a little bit odd, but I've been thinking about what are methods or models of how peace builders and peace organizations can be funded more sustainably, so that they're not so dependent on, donations or grants or money that comes with strings attached. Are there some ways that peace organizations could have their own financial sustainability, so that they could have the courage to do the very best things that they could for peace building? Sometimes I think we do the things that we can get funds for, and we neglect the very best thing that we think could happen. And so this is about, if we could undo that. So I've actually been looking at how multimillionaires make money online, and trying to think, okay, if they hoard that money, is there some ways of engaging with each other that we can, rather than move the benefit to the individual, can we move it to the collective or to peace organizations? So I'm volunteering doing these video trainings. I want to offer them for free, and I want to see if there's some way that we can find a more financially sustainable way of being together. So this first video, it's going to be about what does it take to inspire peace builders, and I hope I look forward to joining with you on this journey of Peace Builders Beyond Borders, and thinking about inspiring peace builders. Alright, so this is my low-tech teaching strategies to show with just some paper and markers and an iPhone. There's a lot we can actually do with each other. And so I want to talk to you about inspiring peace builders. I think when I look back on my career, time as a peace builder, one of the most powerful questions I discovered along the way is to ask people, what are you longing for? And if you think about that even for yourself, what do you long for? I know for many of us, this question brings up the things in our life that aren't going well. Injustice, violence, trauma, and sometimes this is quite difficult. These are times of exclusion where we felt invisible, or where we've been violated, or our people have been violated. And yet there's something that gets unleashed when people start to think about, what do I long for in terms of community healing? And I think actually the beauty of it is, even if we get the answer wrong, if we pursue community healing in some way, a healing path often does open up for us. So I think about what is it that you're longing for as part of this journey on peace building, and find creative ways to ask this. When we started the Canadian School of Peacebuilding, just to kind of give you an application, we were doing 5-day intensive courses in June. We still do that. But at the beginning, as academics, we would say, these are the courses we think that peace builders need. And this, of course, is backwards. We do all kinds of damage, I think, when we think we know what other people need and think that we should impose that on them. But we didn't know where to start, so we laid out some courses, and we would keep laying it out. And eventually we figured out we weren't asking this question: what is it that you're longing for? What do you need? How can we serve you? And this led us to a totally different kind of conversation. We had networks of peace builders in 50 different countries, and we had hundreds of them answer surveys. And this is one way of getting at this question: what do you long for? And we would ask them, what do you need? How can we serve you? What is it that you're longing for? And sometimes we would give them 50 different potential courses, or we would say, if you could invite people in to teach anyone in the world, who would you invite? If you could have a course on anything in the world, what would you want it on? And slowly we started to begin to trust the peace builders, that they knew what it was that they needed, and that if we journeyed with them on this, pursuing what's our best sense of community peace building in this point, even if we were wrong, good things would happen. And so, we asked hundreds of peace builders from all these different countries, and we started, and this is our practice now, of developing courses that are really guided by their best insights of what their needs are. So I want to tell you about a few of what emerged as very significant desires, things that people were longing for. That's what I'm using this chart for. So I want to tell you what some of the things that emerged from that listening process to peace builders. And I told you I would give you some of what I thought are the best tools we've learned. And so if you look at the blue lines here, and this first column, when we first started doing conflict resolution, where we spent a lot of time focusing on what's the issue, and this is really asking questions of what. And you can see here I'm borrowing from one of my favorite peace builders, John Paul Letterhawk, and he uses this chart. And so, the issue gets us focusing on what is it that we're fighting about, usually focused on the negative. How can we find a solution to that? But there's so many conflicts in our world, and probably most of the important ones don't go away simply by arguing or even coming up to agreement on a solution on kind of what the issue is. The problems go much deeper than that. So some peace builders were noticing most of these issues they're embedded in relationships, and we need to have a wider view of the conflicts. And then if we keep having conflicts, or the same kinds of issues keep coming up repeatedly, probably it's not about the issues, probably it's about something deeper. Probably the relationships would be a place to start. And so a whole bunch of approaches started to look at not how do we use conflict to come to solutions over the what, but how do we use it as a window into the relationships and issues that might be in those relationships. And others said, well, no, actually, these relationships, we have to go farther. They're embedded in systems. if we just deal with some issue between two people, and we even deal with it well relationally, but we don't deal with the greater systemic issues. If there's issues of systemic racism or systemic violence, and we just deal with the problem down here, we actually make the system work better. But what if the system needs to change? And so this, as you get farther and farther away, this is looking at what are the systems that we need to engage. But often when we think about how do we work at systemic change, for most people, this almost becomes disempowering, because it's like everywhere. Where do we even start? And so this is where this community is, this unit of people between relationship and system. And I think originally it was called subsystem, but a community to me defines it a little bit more. Maybe we can't get rid of systemic racism everywhere, but we could work at it in our community, in our school, or in our village, or in our workplace. And those would be examples of thinking in a community lens. This bottom part of the chart talks about time, and as we go further and further that way, in fact, John Paul really wants us to start at the end rather than starting with the present and working towards some hoped future. He says, let's begin with that long-term vision of peace building, and then work our way back to how it is that we need to be in the present moment, what we need to do in the present. And to be honest, peace builders, those that talk about peace, often have a bias to the future. Not always, but often have a bias to the future. They look at, if we could get along, what would we be doing? And there is something very powerful about how do we imagine us being together in 20 years or in 50 years. Sometimes those that talk about justice, they'll say, hey, wait a second, there's all sorts of things that happened to us in our past. And so we, as peace builders, we need to be time travelers, sometimes moving into the future, sometimes moving into the present, but also sometimes moving into the past, both the traumas of the past and the wisdom traditions of the past. So these 10 different areas in the chart talk about kind of 10 different capacities. If you're thinking in terms of crisis management, you're probably thinking about relationships or issues of what's going on right now. And this is where this crisis management works at things like negotiation and mediation. But so often we spend all of our time and attention here, and if this is the very first thing we do, it's often just a knee-jerk reaction, and sometimes that creates itself cycles of violence. And so what this chart is about is how can each of these different zones inform each other. And we didn't start with this chart with School of Peacebuilding and say, okay, now we're going to offer courses in each of these things. But over the course of 7 years, as I look back, it kind of emerged when we asked that question, what is it that you're longing for? We found people kind of answering this. We found that we did actually move to each of these. So I want to talk very briefly about each of these different capacities that are in purple. In red, you may be able to see different names. They're actually all people that have taught in the School of Peacebuilding, and some of the people that I find most inspiring in the world in terms of who it is that can help us with these issues. So let me, when John Paul teaches this, he focuses on this side and on that long-term vision. And one of the most helpful things that I was taught by him relates to this area. He says when you go into a conflict area or work with a community in conflict, one of the very first things you have to ask is who in the community has that capacity to dream, to be a poet or a prophet, to articulate what is, but also to be connected to what could be. And he says, you know, you're going to find this, it's probably not the politicians, it's probably more the poets, the musicians, maybe the novelists. Who are those people in the community that are holding up an alternative possibility that maybe life doesn't have to be like this? And he says often these folks get so no cultural space, and you have to find those folks and unleash the poets and the prophets and the dreamers. So we've had a number of courses called Poets, Prophets, and Dreamers, or something like this, variations of this that intentionally use more creative means of looking at this long-term vision. Ivo Markovic was a guy who taught in a seminary in Bosnia. In fact, we brought him in from Bosnia. And Ivo taught in a seminary and was teaching theology, and when the war just turned terrible there, he left his teaching post, and he went between Christian and Muslim communities and invited people to a choir, to an interfaith choir. And his rules for the choir was, in this choir, we're going to sing the sacred songs of each other. And so while others were trying to demonize and pit these two groups beside him, Ivo was literally traveling village to village and sometimes being challenged by officers with guns or rebels with guns that saw him as a threat. And yet he just wanted to create a space where they could sing together. And so Ivo came and talked and taught about how they did this, and got, you know, students from different parts of the world to actually do some of that singing together in his class. As that's one way of working at this vision piece. If you know Martin Luther King Jr., he was fantastic about, I have a dream that one day, you know, this dreaming, unleashing a dream in such a way that it informs us about how to be present in the moment. Because remember, his I Have a Dream speech was getting them ready for one of the great marches. So this is vision, and Ivo is one of the people that I think of. One of the areas of peace and conflict work is looking not at the whole system like the vision does and the long term, but looking at the long term and the issues and the relationships that we have with each other. A little more concrete here. And saying, how do we need to relate together so that we don't have these injustices and violence and trauma in the future? What are good ways of being? So this is called conflict prevention, but it's deeper than that. It's about what are transformative things that we can do in the present that will create 7 generations of good in the future. And so one of the people that to me is fantastic about this is Stan McKay. Stan is an Aboriginal man in Canada who was the head of the largest Christian denomination in Canada. And in Canada, Aboriginal people, well, the Truth and Reconciliation Commissioner just recently said this was a genocide and fits all the definitions of a genocide. And so there's been just awful trauma that's happened from that. But out of that forced slumber comes poets and dreamers and people like Stan McKay, who have this ability to work at deep reconciliation between people and to think about how do we resolve this, but also how do we walk together in a long-term kind of way. And so Stan taught courses about that. Let me tell you, and then we have Karen Ridd. In the middle is conflict transformation, and the idea is all these different zones are usually different characters that their paths don't always cross. But part of the point of this tool is every part of this needs to inform each other, and conflict transformation is one of the places that we try and pull on all of those threads. We try and be like a bee that cross-pollinates all of these different ideas so that they're connected with each other. Karen Ridd is one of the best trainers in the world, in my opinion, in conflict transformation. And we've been lucky enough to have her 3 times to come and teach courses on just kind of basic peace skills, but also training the trainer. And how is it that we develop this capacity to deeply engage in long-term change processes in ways that are informed by all of these other ways. So that's conflict transformation. Some people said we need to help with the crisis that were going on. How do we do mediation, but not in a way that just gets rid of the conflict, but in a way that it has the ability maybe to shake the foundations of the system. And so we got David Dick taught a course on the foundations for conflict transformation, and he also does a lot of work looking at how do we do mediation and conflict intervention in such a way that's informed by this whole grid or lens. And so the last one on this side is root causes. So there's some people that look fairly short term at what are the conflicts we have, what are the problems in the system, and what are the root causes? Where do those come from? And we should always be asking about root causes. When we see most of what we see in the world are symptoms of the past. They're here for good or for bad because of what's happened in the past. And if we want to know how do we relate to them, we have to say, where did this come from? What's its root? What's its name? Where did it come from? And so we've had a number of people come in to teach courses on root causes of various kinds. Martin Entz works at organic farming mechanisms, and so for him, one of the root causes of conflict in our world is access to sustainable access to food, and that this will continue to be a root cause of war. But if we get it right, we can make this also a root cause of justice, of peace, of reconciliation. And so he talks about how could Gandhi inform the way we think about food, and others. Mubarak Awad is a Palestinian who was involved with the second intifada, the non-violent intifada, and he was trying to figure out how do we use non-violence to interrupt a system that wasn't providing justice for everyone, and so he was not interested in the short term. Hey, we need more land, or we need this. He was looking at how do we engage this whole system, and how do we use nonviolent direct action to do that. So he came and taught a course on that. All right, so that takes us to this side of the chart. And this side is about the future, that long-term future. On this side, this talks about how do we move back in time. Like here it says 0 to 9 years. This is decades, even centuries. And sometimes I tell my students, as peace builders, we do need to be time travelers and have this ability to move back in time. So what do I mean by that? If you think even of your own life, the conflicts and traumas that we've experienced, if we've not figured out how to deal with them well in the present, and we've not designed conflict prevention well, we get all these undealt with traumas, and they hook us into our past. They become part of how we understand ourselves, we as individuals, or even collectively, how we understand what happened to our people, to our faith tradition, in some cases our nations, but our people. And so as we look back at the past, at, okay, what are the harms that have happened in the past that we still need to be dealing with? How do we work at acknowledging these harms? Kate Pranish is, when I asked people, when we did our listening, we found that people wanted courses on restorative justice. So I started asking people, who's the very best trainer in the world on restorative justice? And I kept hearing people say, you got to get Kay, you got to get Kay. So we brought her up from the United States to do her circle training. And of course, just inspiring and wise. And she works so far outside of the box that people from so many different faith traditions and cultures were really compelled by the way she worked at circle processes to undo kind of all of this stuff. But here it's in the section of acknowledging harms. What have we done? Where do we want to go? How do we work at this? When we look back at some of the conflicts that have happened, sometimes we have conflicts, and this will growingly be the case, I think, with global warming, is because we've not figured out how to meet the basic needs of each other. We've not figured out fair ways of sharing around the world. Stu Clark and Sophia Murphy, we wanted to have them at the very first School of Peacebuilding, but that didn't work out, so we got them a little bit later. They've worked with the World Trade Organization on food issues and governments around the world, and trying to pressure them to make better deals for poor farmers around the world on food policy issues, and find better ways of sharing. And we know if we can't share food, and if we can't share water, we're all going to be in trouble. And so this is a massive way of trying to transform the system, critique the system, but also give it a way forward. If we've not met these needs in the past, if countries have neglected it, what kind of changes can we work at in the future? So that's kind of unmet needs. If you go back to the long term, to the centuries view, sometimes when we're so focused on the future, we forget that there's all sorts of resources in the past that can help guide us. And we also forget that the stories in the past are both resources for peace and for violence, and that we have to be working on transforming both of those. Those of us that follow faith traditions, this is kind of naming that space of, it says narrative wisdom traditions. And Harry Huebner is a theologian that's been deeply informative to my life, and he taught a course on Mennonite approaches to peace building. But how do we draw deeply from our faith traditions and critique it at the same time? For those of us that are interested in peace, so much of the violence in the world has come from our faith traditions. And so how do we relook at those faith traditions and critique the violence and the colonialism and the ways that the traditions have been used in grotesque ways around the world, but still kind of keep that spirit alive in the positive sense? And so that's this narrative wisdom traditions that look at the whole thing and say, there's other ways of imagining who we are and what we are to be. There's also lots of people that work in this area of healing harms traditions, and I put Waypon from Thailand. We brought her in. She's an engaged Buddhist, feminist, advocate or trainer, and again, super inspiring teacher in my own thinking. And we were lucky to have her come in and teach about. She did a course on women in peace building, and she's coming again to teach that again. But her roots come not just from, how do we respond in the present, but if we're going to take seriously the Buddha's teachings, and we're going to engage issues and relationships in the world, how do we do that? In her case, in Thailand, in patriarchal Buddhism, she works with nuns who have been abused by monks, and she works with both the nuns and the monks to help the monks to listen. Remember, that was the theme for this video, to help them to listen to what was the experience of nuns in such a hierarchical situation. And she is just a deep inspiration. One of the first people that we had, and this is, in the middle because it kind of ties to this, is this renegotiating trauma and identity. And Pete Merrings from South Africa, he's one of the Truth and Reconciliation Commissioners. They had 19, and he's one of them, and has worked with Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela, and worked on the South African TRC. And that was one attempt at how do we renegotiate the traumas in our life? How do we renegotiate our very sense of identity when so much has gone wrong? And the TRC in South Africa was a bold attempt at doing that, and he worked with his students. In fact, when he was doing this, the TRC in Canada was just starting, and he met with the head commissioner of the TRC. His students learned with him, and they wrote a letter collectively to the TRC in Canada, to the head commissioner, to say, hey, maybe there's some things we can learn from the South African experience. So this is this connecting peace builders of a different kind. So I hope this is helpful for you. I've found it super helpful over time to listen to the needs of other peace builders, to ask what do they need, but also to look at these various areas. We often get stuck in one area, and part of the call of this is that all of these things aren't little boxes, but rather they're an integral woven garment of our collective destiny, and we need to figure out how to have each of them constantly informing each other, touching each other, and to do that we need to learn from people that are dissimilar from us, that we don't just keep getting together with the same people, but we find ways of rubbing shoulders with dissimilar peace builders as we do our peace work. All right, there you have the first training on inspiring peace builders. And I want you to think about, what are you going to do with this? How are you going to use this information? Later on I'll ask you to comment on if it's valuable for you. But what do you long for? What kind of community healing are you longing for? Or are people around you longing for? What are the ways you could ask some of these questions to the people in your circles? What are your needs? How can we serve you better? What's the best thing that we could do for you? What are creative ways that you could ask those questions? I talked about surveys, but that's just one tool. You need to figure out what that looks like in your own environment. And that complicated chart, I hope that doesn't confuse you. Sometimes when we see all sorts of things, we get discouraged to say, oh, I can't do all of those things. But sometimes that kind of chart helps us remove some of our blinders to say, oh, I've been working too narrowly and I need to be informed by these people. And so I want you to think about, who do you need to connect with in your own communities, your own environment, who could help shape you more as a peace builder, because part of this is who we are always formed by who we expose ourselves to, who we rub shoulders with. And I think this is one of the deepest things that transforms us is who are we? Who do we see? Who do we walk alongside? And you could use that chart to say, who do you need to seek out? Who doesn't normally maybe come into your sphere that you could seek out. So I know that sometimes when people see, 10 different areas, this is complicated, I don't do this, I'm just a mother, I'm just a frontline worker, I'm just a policy person. We have all sorts of ways of demeaning ourselves and discouraging ourselves. But I think discouragement is not going to serve us as peace builders. Bitterness is not going to serve us as peace builders. We have to figure out how to let those questions, that energy, fuel us into a different direction. And so the next video is going to look at some of these things. It's going to look at what are some of the discouragements that come when you try and change a system that doesn't want to be changed. And what are the options that you have to engage with that system that doesn't want to be changed? What would that look like? Who's doing it already? How could we do it better? Those are the questions we're going to ask in the next video. What I want you to do right now, though, is look below the video. There should be a like. You can like that to let people know this video series is a good idea. There's buttons for you to share it. This video series is right now available free, so let people know about it. We want people to have this training. And then what I really want is for you to comment below. There's boxes for you to comment on the web page, and comment. Let me know what is it that you long for community healing. How might you use this kind of framework for listening? What has worked well for you before? What are some of my blinders of pieces that are important that weren't on that chart or that we didn't talk about? Leave a comment. I'm going to try and read each of them, and I look forward to those comments and to where we can take this in the next video.
There's a lot of incredible people all around the world who fight and give their lives for justice and for peace and in the name of love. And they are rarely recognized. Rarely. And so often they do it, and they're not only not acknowledged for it, but they're spat upon and just tortured for it. But here, at the Canadian School of Peacebuilding, we are given a space to be able to connect with people who are wanting to acknowledge and walk alongside people who are taking peace seriously and who are wanting to change the world through this.
You meet different people, you meet interesting people, you meet people who really understand and who have the passion about the world and about peace. I think one central thing about the School of Peace for me has been the understanding of the world issues around peace.
I'm optimistic also when I encounter non-Indigenous students, when I engage the students in my own class here at the Canadian School of Peacebuilding. I am very optimistic that in this country there are students out there in post-secondary education institutions who are thirsting for knowledge about our people, Indigenous people, who want to understand, not for the sake of just understanding what happened, but they want to understand to make things different. They want to contribute to our well-being as a people. And that's the contribution that they want to make to their country. Because what they see is that their country is the potential of Canada to become a leader in the world for human rights or for peace is going to be impeded unless they deal with the issues of the First Nations, the Métis and Inuit within Canada.
I think every region and every cultural group that gets involved brings special talents and special experience. And to me, it's pretty vital. And all of that has been a tremendous learning experience for me and just enriches my own practice and theory building.
Canadian School of Peacebuilding has been great in terms of offering the opportunity for us to really do some thoughtful reflection and to provide information and expertise on the issues that we're looking at.
There's a lot of opportunity to talk about your own cases and your own struggles and what you have difficulties in, and then hearing other people in the class bringing so many different perspectives, both religious and seculars, and more spiritual approaches to how to look at the situation, I think was very, very valuable because sometimes when you are in a certain place, it's hard. You need to go outside in order to look at the issue.
Like Imbal said, it was learning about relationship building, but also actually doing it in class, because while sharing those experiences, you did build relationships with each other, right? And it was very reassuring that there are more people out there who are concerned about the same things as you are, so you're not alone, and you can just help each other out and build connections, and like Margopin said, network and create those connectors where you can actually then, you know, help each other out, whether I go back home or I'm in Toronto or I'm somewhere else. That doesn't matter. You still have those relationships to fall back on and hopefully benefit from and help each other out.
And the bottom line of, you know, without sounding Pollyannish, that it's all about building relationships. That peace, at the end of the day, it's hard to maintain or to pursue or to have if we don't have relationship and we don't humanize the other. Because a lot of lack of peace has to do with dehumanizing the other. And it's hard to dehumanize the other if you have a relationship with them. So relationship is really key.
I think it's an incredible opportunity to bring together people that are involved in the work of building peace from different places that wouldn't otherwise get a chance to come together and share stories. And they are, of course, their own best resource for each other. And in my experience, it's not easy to find these sorts of opportunities where people come from disparate places and have enough time together that they're able to move into a layer of honesty and frankness in their conversation and vulnerability. We don't get that kind of space at a conference or at an event that just lasts for a few days. So one of the things that I'm very much appreciating about the Canadian School of Peacebuilding is that people have enough time to develop relationships.
I think peacebuilders are working so hard on the ground, they often don't have the opportunities to learn from each other. And so if we can create some space to create an oasis of peace, to encourage them, to inspire them, to equip them, even to challenge them, provoke them to be peace in more and more bold ways, I think this will be a wonderful thing.
In building peace, it's very often the one-to-one relationships and those personal connections that make things work. And so when you get people from groups that are often seen as being opposed to each other or that are maybe in conflict with each other, that gives you a chance to start breaking down those barriers.
For anybody who wants to come and to understand what peace is all about in the world, this is the right place to come. I mean, you meet people who have worked in South America, Africa, Asia, China, India. So a very good diverse groups of people that you meet. And yeah, exciting.
To participate in a school like this, it's a privilege and it's a gift. And if you've been given that gift, take it and go hard.